right, we got Will who asks, what would you recommend or tell someone that wants to be a weightlifting coach? Don't do it. Run away. I'm just kidding, Will. There's a lot of things I would recommend, and I'll see if I can get them into some kind of fairly concise, coherent answer here. Number one, first and foremost, ask yourself why you want to be a weightlifting coach. And this is, I guess, true for any profession, but you can get into these things for the wrong reasons. And if that's the case, you're going to be miserable and unsuccessful, and it's going to be a bad choice. So the worst reason you can get into coaching of any kind, really any job, is the desire for recognition. That's a terrible motivation to be a coach, and it's unfortunately not uncommon. And to be a really good coach, you have to inherently believe that your athlete's success is more important than your own. And that's easy to say. It's easy for any coach to say, of course I care about my athlete's success, but in the back of your mind, you may be looking at that as, if my athletes are successful, that means I'm successful, which means I get all the chicks and money. And first of all, let me burst your bubble there. There's no money in weightlifting coaching, at least in the U.S. And you are never going to be successful long term because your athletes are not going to trust you. They're not going to rely on you, and they're not going to invest themselves if they can sense, which they can, that you are not truly dedicated to their success, that you are doing it for yourself ultimately rather than for them. So just if you do some legitimate soul searching on that and you find that that is your motivation, just cut your losses now and move on and go to Hollywood and become an actor or something. You'll be better off, even if you become a waiter actor. So first and foremost, after that is you have to be a weightlifter. Okay, you have to be a competitive weightlifter for a significant period of time. That doesn't mean you have to be a world-class weightlifter, although I do think you should at least be competing at the national level, if at all possible. Now, of course, if you're getting into this later in life, that may not even be an option physically, but I do believe you should do everything in your power to achieve that level and to experience competitive weightlifting at that level, because you learn so much about the sport. You get exposed to so many different athletes and coaches at that level that you otherwise would not have access to. And there are enough similarities between national level competition and international level competition that if you have been a national level weightlifter, you can figure out the international level stuff okay. Whereas if you have only competed at the local level, making that jump to national and international levels as a coach is tough, because you're doing it all by just talking to other people or trying to pick the information and experiences up through reading and video, and it's just not the same. You don't have the same kind of confidence. You don't have the same kind of ability to pick up on the little tiny details and nuances that are just kind of impossible to encapsulate in reading and video material. So that's number one. Be a weightlifter, a legitimate weightlifter for a significant period of time. And by that I mean years. I don't mean 6 months. And kind of along with that, which is an obvious combination here, is work with a really well-established, successful coach as a lifter. And I realize that, the response I get to that from almost everybody is, well, there aren't any good coaches in my area. Hey, you know what? I sold out of a business and moved hundreds of miles across the entire state of California to work with a coach who I believed could help me. So the question is, how badly do you want to do it? I know people who have moved across the country more than once to work with successful coaches because they really wanted it. So You can say, oh, it's not practical for me, but the question is not whether or not it's practical. The question is, how badly do you want to be a great coach? Think of it like if you're a kid coming out of high school and you have some career that requires college, are you not going to go do a college program because there doesn't happen to be a college 2 blocks down the road from where you grew up? Of course not. You're typically going to go to a distant college, pay a obscene amount of money to do so, or maybe try to spend your parents' money. But the point is that it's not necessarily going to be convenient, and it very likely will not be convenient. So figure it out and decide whether or not you want to do it. And part of being a lifter with a very successful coach is you can typically parlay that into apprenticing with that coach. And I make this point a lot because it's very important. You look at kind of the history of craftsmanship in the trades or in any kind of profession that requires skilled craftsmanship. And apprenticeship is really how that information and that knowledge and that skill gets passed on from generation to generation. And I think that is so critical. You know, the greatest craftsmen didn't learn that craft by reading a book or going on YouTube. They learned it by spending time working under another great craftsman who was able to pass on that experience, that information directly. And so you're going to get a lot of that naturally as a weightlifter working with a good weightlifting coach. But make it very clear eventually to your coach that your goal is to become a weightlifting coach. And that coach will very likely be interested and motivated to pass on what they have learned over the years to you, because that becomes kind of part of their legacy. It's very gratifying as a coach to be able to pass on what you know and kind of continue that lineage to some extent. So take advantage of that as much as you can. Along with that, though, is during the course of your experience as a lifter and a coach, get exposure to as many different coaches, as many different gyms, as many different athletes as possible, because people do things differently, right? There are a lot of different approaches to this sport, both in terms of technical execution, in terms of program design, and in terms of coach-athlete dynamic. There's everything from the very kind of militaristic sort of relationship between a coach and an athlete to the more kind of father or mother figure sort of dynamic. So if you don't experience those things, it can be difficult to kind of find what seems to suit you the most, or having those tools in your toolbox to be able to interact with the wide range of lifters that you're inevitably going to encounter as a weightlifting coach will allow you to do as good of a job as possible. During that time you're working as a competitive lifter, get out there and talk to as many different coaches and athletes as possible. Learn from them. Don't just walk up to a coach and say, "What can you tell me about being a weightlifting coach?" No one knows how to answer that question. It's the most open-ended question, next to what's the meaning of life. Honestly, I can answer the what's the meaning of life question faster and simpler than, tell me how to be a good weightlifting coach. Ask them specific questions. What do you do in this situation? Or if you had a weightlifter who was having this problem, and these are the circumstances, how would you address it? Learn as much as you can from that. Use your experience to formulate those questions, and then go present them to different people to kind of see the range of advice and approaches that are out there. And then finally, don't rely on coaching weightlifting as a sole source of income, because you are going to be not only very disappointed, but very poor. People really mistake my profession as coaching. It's really not. My profession is not weightlifting coaching. That costs me money. Granted, I have paying clients in addition to the national and above level lifters that I coach. My wife is the same way. but that really honestly doesn't even cover the cost of being a coach to our competitive lifters, right? So my profession is publishing and educating. I publish books, writing most of them. I create video content. I sell products that I've created with educational content. I travel around and do seminars. That is how I support myself and my family. It's not by coaching competitive weightlifters. Now, if you found a way, or you live in a country where a competitive weightlifting coach can actually make a living, good for you. Take advantage of it if that's what you want to do. But the vast majority of people watching this video are never going to have that opportunity. So you need to have some other plan in place for income. And ideally you can make that related to the sport of weightlifting, but it's not always going to be possible. So get a sugar mama or a sugar daddy or something like that who loves the idea of you coaching and making no money, or find additional sources of income that you can rely on and that allow your work to be somewhat flexible, allow you to travel a lot, because you're going to end up traveling to all these competitions. It's going to cost you thousands of dollars every single time and lost days of work. So make sure going into this that you are not suffering under the delusion that you will become rich by coaching national and international level weightlifters. You will be very disappointed.
Greg Everett with Catalyst Athletics here. Please subscribe, like, and share this video. If you have questions, post them in the comments. I answer all of them. Also check out catalystathletics.com for the biggest Olympic weightlifting exercise library out there, along with hundreds of free articles and videos and other resources for both athletes and coaches.